Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday Night Bible Study for the United Church of Newport for November 11th of 2020. We've been taking this opportunity for quite a few months now, every week in the middle of the week, to dive into a piece of scripture that we otherwise might not be able to. Now, these opportunities are nothing new and nothing special. But in this challenging time, in this time of pandemic, which it would be easy of us to become very tired of, to become very fatigued of all the difficult steps and changes in our lives that we have needed to make. But now, as for the first time in a long time, there is great hope for the future. There is great hope for an end to things being this way and for progress to come. We are optimistic about the progress of vaccine trials. We are hopeful, but at the same time, we are deeply challenged by, in our own county and in the Newport area especially, the situation becoming worse than it's been at any point during the pandemic. We turn our hearts, of course, to the family of the woman who died last weekend as a result of being infected with COVID-19. We turn our attention and our hearts absolutely to the junior high school community, which is now reporting infections over the last couple of weeks. A very challenging situation. We turn our prayers and our hopes to those hundreds, now more than 100,000 a day, who are receiving that bad news of being infected. And we are going to do what we can. Do what we can to keep ourselves safe, to keep one another safe, and then to care and support those who care for those who are sick. We're going to do what we always do, and what we have always do, and what we will always do, which is care. And we're going to take time for ourselves and for our spiritual realms. We're going to take time to refuel ourselves. We're going to take time to provide for ourselves. We're going to take time to experience the timeless beauty and the timeless reassurance of Scripture together, however we can and whenever we can. In particular, this week, this coming Sunday, we'll be focusing on a reading from the Minor Prophets. So, in Bible study, we have the chance to jump into a reading from the Gospels. Now, last Sunday, I did not use the suggested Gospel reading for that week, which was the parable of wise and foolish maidens. And this is a parable that follows immediately after that parable, so close that it's almost seen to be a continuation of the same message. And it is a similar message, certainly. This is going to be the parable of the talents, which comes, as we will notice, extremely close to the end of the book of Matthew. This is in Matthew chapter 25, that Jesus is already in Jerusalem, is teaching in the temple or teaching among his followers. He has come to be quite a dramatic and important figure. He has already riled the anger of the civic and religious leaders in Jerusalem. He's already on his way to his final fate, his final crucifixion. Of course, we know that that is not the end. And so, before that, he shares a lesson in story about how we approach our lives and what we have to do in our lives. So this is Matthew 25, beginning with verse 14, the parable of the talents. For it will be as when a man going on a journey called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his abilities. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will see you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not winnow. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sowed, and gather where I have not winnowed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to him who has his 10 talents. For to everyone who has everyone who has will more be given, and he will have abundance. But from who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. There men will weep and gnash their teeth. Pretty strong words, pretty harsh words even, and words that relate closely, and a message that is very reminiscent of some of the denunciations in the prophets, including the one we're going to be reading this coming Sunday from Zephaniah. But we have some interesting characters that Jesus creates in this situation. Now, it's been a temptation throughout scriptural interpretation from the very beginning to make these stories just descriptive of reality, as if perhaps this was either something Jesus had experienced specifically, or that he was like a fortune teller and saw into the past of someone who was with him, and saw that this had happened, this experience, and that had shaped them, and this was how he was connecting with that person. And not that this is specifically a way of expressing in language that everyone there would have understood salvation and works and living the good life in ways that that people would understand and that would be disassociated with the religious terminology that had been so sourly and terribly manipulated by those same religious and civic leaders who Jesus had cast out of the temple and the temple precincts and had challenged so deeply not very long before. Using language of the common world, and actually language that's very harsh and cruel and mean and secular, entirely common, that at least in the story people can be honest, because in the temple no one is honest. Jesus cast out the money changers for their incredible dishonesty, for the manipulation, Jesus came into conflict with the chief priests and scribes because they pretended to be good and true and honest. Jesus was constantly debating with the Pharisees and Sadducees because they puffed themselves up on fine words, but did no good in their lives, justifying every wicked act as being part of a greater plan, or true to some very particular twist of something they had promised. Now, in this story, we have one who is described as being a hard man, a master of great wealth, who goes away on a long journey, so has so much disposable income that they can go on this long trip. And we don't hear why. Perhaps it was a pilgrimage or just a vacation even. And leaves so much behind that he can simply give over sections of it to some among his many servants to take care of, to be stewards over. And we hear that he gives 5 talents to one servant, 2 talents to another, 1 talent to a third servant, each according to their abilities. So he thinks he knows the people who work for him, and it seems he does know them very well, and splits out this wealth among these 3 in this particular way, so that all will remain loyal to him, and all, in fact, did remain loyal to him. But all will be tested. All will be tested not only in their faith, in their loyalty, but also in their works, in their actions. Now, this would have meant a lot to people in ancient times. Leaving someone as a steward over property was commonplace and not very much like having like a house sitter in our present day, or your employee running your company, because you can always be in touch. But a person who leaves town is just gone. And we hear in other of the parables that apparently it would have been commonplace for stewards to just sort of take over, banking on or betting on or hoping that the owner will never return. So we have, in this instance, 3 who are essentially loyal, 3 who are devoted and loyal, and take this money, though actually it's kind of a funny thing. We assume, and we can fairly assume, that this is money that these people are taking care of. We hear of them going to the marketplace to trade, or of this being able to be fairly easily buried by one person, and inconspicuous enough that when it was buried, it was left alone. But a talent is a lot of money. A lot of money. A talent, is technically a unit of weight, equivalent to close to about 100 pounds, actually, more than 40 kilograms. And when we refer to a talent, it's in terms of a talent either of silver or of gold. And in this instance, it doesn't specify, so we're actually kind of at the point of guessing or assuming that because it doesn't specify, this means it's a talent of gold. 40 pounds of gold, or 100 pounds of gold, 40 kilograms of gold at current prices is several $million. Several $1 million. So we're talking about even the single talent is the money for, in our own day, multiple restaurants, multiple farms, like a herd of a multi-million-dollar farm might have 100 head of milking heifers. $1 million restaurant might have 100 tables and 50 employees. These are huge assets, even for the one who has the least. And even it kind of makes a lot more sense that when this long journey is over and this owner finds that this third servant, despite that they were given so much, has done actually nothing. I have a lot more sympathy for the owner. A lot more sympathy that even the most basic sort of responsibilities of stewardship have been completely left. And that though this third servant has much less than the first two, this third servant still has an incredible abundance. And we also hear specifically the story is not about this third servant complaining. He does not make excuses. He does not say, I only had 1 talent, so what could I do? He says, you are a hard man who reaped what you did not sow and gathered what you did not winnow. That you are a man first over of wealth to pay others to do your work for you, and secondarily of not great honesty or not great integrity. You do not participate in your own business, in effect. You just expect the profits. And indeed, reaping what you did not sow is quite an insult in the present day, and was even then even more of an insult. Getting what you did not earn, that is getting ill-gotten gains. Taking what is not yours. One of the harshest insults in our present day, really, but especially taking what is not yours by a twisting of legitimate or legal means. And so the master says, you know that I don't care by what means you take care of and steward this money. So why not do the worst thing possible? Why not go to the bankers and deposit it and receive the interest? Why not go to the bankers? Why not go to those who throw widows and orphans out of their houses? Why not go to those who care for nothing other than money? Why not go to those who make nothing in their lives, who don't grow anything or craft anything, have no idea of beauty or helpfulness or anything else? For that's really what we hear time and time again, is what ancient bankers are like. Banking reform and changes in times have meant that banking is a very, very different thing today. And maybe the equivalent for many would be to say, you knew all of this, why not take it and invest it with Goldman Sachs? With the worst company you can imagine, though the most profitable. Why not do that rather than doing nothing? At least there would be more now. And then with each of these 3 servants in turn, the master is impressed and says what is to come next for them. That those who have been entrusted with a little now will be entrusted with a lot. Now, 5 talents is something like $10 million in today's money. So saying that those who were that was just a little, and now that servant will be entrusted with a lot by comparison. This is a master of incredible wealth. And now we remember that this is not financial advice from Jesus. This is advice for living. This is a parable. This is one of the timeless stories of common elements in all of our lives across time. That Jesus is not talking about money. Jesus is talking about our souls. Jesus is talking about the blessings from God that we are given in our lives to steward with. And that even the one who has the least has an incredible amount, has been given full freedom to do whatever he wishes with it. Someone comes up to you or someone you know and says, here, take this $5 million for the next 3 years. What could you do with that in the intervening time? Buy a house, live in that house for 5 years, be totally secure in your life, and then sell that house for more? So that you lived in comfort, were able to help people in your community, and still returned to the owner what they had given you with extra interest? There's a Mark Twain story on a similar vein, the £1 million banknote of just a random American sort of like ruffian who just shows up in London and then is given £1 million, $5 million, which more than 150 years ago was an incredible amount of money, and said, here, take this for the next month. And what happens along the way is not so dissimilar. It's a life-changing event. But we have been given gifts that dwarf these. Our souls, which are beloved of God, our free wills even, our communities, and our free will and communities and souls do not do well to be shut away, to be hidden. If we ever doubted that, the pandemic has taught us how difficult it is to be shut away. But Jesus, here, nearing the end of his ministry, getting into the most important and most timeless, most eternal and significant of his instructions, says, do not retreat from the world. It would be better for you to associate with sinners. It would be better for you to do things which are sinful than to do nothing. For if you sin, at least you are building community. At least you are making connections. At least you are building trust. Or maybe not sinful, but unsavory things. Things that most people don't particularly approve of. That's better than doing nothing. And so I, for one, am much more distressed in our own present time by movements, ostensibly Christian movements, that suggests that Christian communities need to retreat from society at large. I'm far more distressed by those than any level of so-called sinful activity in the community at large. Because Jesus is pretty specific, saying it's better to participate in unsavory things or even sinful things to increase yourself and your communities, to at least build connections, if not virtue. To build up your own confidence and build up your social capital that you can then make a positive difference. To, in the much maligned way, change the system from the inside. That is far better than to retreat, to cloister yourself off, to remove yourself from the wider community. And so, it's difficult. It's far, far more difficult to listen to so many Christians thinking that they cannot participate, that this nation perhaps is too far gone, to not engage with the realities of our certainly moral challenges, but of our incredible opportunities as a nation and as a world. That, as mostly the Apostle Paul says over and over again, to not let ourselves be corrupted by the wickedness of the world, does not mean to run away from that corruption. Does not mean to run away from those difficulties. Does not mean even actually to avoid them at all. But here we have Jesus saying specifically to take the bull by the horns and go directly into these situations and enrich ourselves, and by doing that, bring glory and dignity to the one we serve. And remember that the one we serve is the Lord God. But that, in particular, is a lesson for another day and many, many other days beside. The rebroadcast of last Sunday's Veterans Sunday worship will be in about half an hour at 6 o'clock, and then we'll be back with a whole new worship Sunday at 9 here on NEKTV and on YouTube. So, dear friends, wherever you are, stay safe, keep in touch, do good work, and we will see you again soon. God bless.